Here's the thing about this. You commit one of the worst crimes imaginable, and then you say, oh, I had a really bad childhood, that's why I did it. It doesn't work that way. Have to give a trigger warning here. We're talking about a 12-year-old child. If you think that listening to this, it is not easy to listen to. It's not easy to talk about. But if you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, shape, or form, skip this video and I will see you in my next ones. Take care of yourselves. I mean it. I love you. Shanda Renee Sharer was born in 1979 in Pineville, Kentucky to Stephen and Jacqueline Sharer. After her parents divorced, her mother remarried and the family moved to Louisville, Kentucky. When that marriage also eventually fell apart, Shanda, her mother, and her older sister then moved to New Albany in Indiana, a small city just across the Ohio River. By the fall of 1991, Shanda was 12 years old. She was starting at a new school and trying to find her place there. Luckily, she was such a likable girl that making new friends came so easily for her. There was nothing about her not to love. She was bright, she was outgoing, she was friendly, she was kind, she was beautiful. She was such a girly girl, but at the same time very athletic. She was in cheerleading, but also played softball and baseball. All around, the exact kind of girl that you would want to be your friend. At her new school, Shanda met a girl called Amanda, and the two quickly became very close, but their friendship didn't start off like a usual friendship normally does. They actually got close because they both found themselves in detention. It was over a misunderstanding and very, very unlike Shanda, because she wasn't the type of girl to get in trouble, but the two of them spent time together, obviously in detention, and continued to do so afterwards. They very quickly became close friends, and then that friendship developed into something romantic. They exchanged notes, they spent time together, and by all accounts, it looked like they genuinely cared for each other in the way that young teenagers do when they experience their first real feelings towards somebody else. It was exciting, it felt real, and it was the reason why Shanda Sharer would not make it to see her 13th birthday. Because to describe the relationship that they had as smooth sailing would be far off. As it turns out, Amanda was already in a relationship. So Amanda was a couple years older than Shanda, and she was already dating another teenage girl called Melinda Loveless. Melinda did not take it well when she found out about Shanda and Amanda. She didn't accept it, but she also didn't walk away from it. Instead, she fixated on it. Things between Melinda and Amanda then fizzled out, but now in Melinda's head, Shanda was the person to blame for ruining her relationship. And when Melinda saw Amanda and Shanda together at a school dance for the first time, whether she knew she was doing it or not, it felt like she made it her life's mission to ruin everything that she could for Shanda. Shanda's mom, meanwhile, had started to notice some changes in her daughter. I don't think that she knew, or at least at this point, that her and Amanda were romantically involved, but even just as a friend, Amanda was not the type of person that seemed to be a good influence on Shanda. The fact that they met at detention was already off-putting. In fact, it was Amanda's fault that both of them were in detention, but the real concern came when Shanda started caring a lot less about the things that she once cared about. She wasn't into sports as much. She no longer cared about getting ready for school, doing her hair, doing her makeup the way that she used to. She started dressing differently, stopped caring about her schoolwork in the way that she once did, and her mom knew that it had to be because of Amanda. Add to that the fact that when Amanda would come around, she had this sassy, cold personality about her. Call it a mother's intuition, but she was not a fan of Amanda's. And neither was the dad, because even though the parents were divorced, Shanda's dad was still very much in her life and she would spend weekends at his house. He was also not a fan of Amanda. He just got a bad vibe. So Shanda and Amanda are in this relationship, and Melinda becomes this person that is constantly throwing so much hate towards Shanda, writing her letters saying very, very disturbing, mean things, calling her names, trying to fight her when she sees her out in public, just being absolutely terrible towards her. And things got so bad that Shanda's mother eventually found out about this. And as a mom, you're naturally going to do whatever you can do to protect your daughter. So Jacqueline decided that she wasn't just going to let this happen. So she pulls Shanda out of school. She transfers her into a different school. She was trying to put distance between Shanda and the situation. And after enrolling at this new school, Shanda and Amanda still tried to stay together, but eventually things just sort of fizzled out. Shanda no longer saw Amanda as a priority for her anymore, and maybe it was just because they weren't seeing each other as much, or maybe it was because she too got tired of dealing with Melinda. Either way, she started to move on, and her parents were happy to see that because she started acting like herself again. They kind of got a wave of relief knowing that they were able to get their daughter out of a bad situation and back on track doing the things that made her happy and making new friends with people who were kind and actually had good intentions. But none of that mattered because Melinda had made up her mind. She had decided that she needed to get rid of Shanda forever. And by the time that January arrived, she had found the people to help her do it. Now is probably a good time to tell you that Melinda Loveless had not had an easy life. She had grown up in a deeply troubled household. Her father, Larry Loveless, had been convicted and was serving time, and Melinda herself had been subjected to awful treatment from him as she was growing up. Investigators and psychiatrists who later examined her described her to be a young woman who had been profoundly damaged by her upbringing and who had developed an intense possessive approach to relationships, leaving no room for rejection or competition. And please do not get this confused. I am in no way, shape, or form saying that this is an excuse for what she goes on to do. Literally not at all whatsoever. But it does help you understand that she did have these deep-rooted abandonment issues amongst other trauma from the moment that she was born, really, which is where that possessiveness over Amanda must have come from, and that feeling of no one is going to hurt me and get away with it. The other three girls that Melinda recruited were 17-year-old Lori Tackett, 15-year-old Hope Rippey, and 15-year-old Toni Lawrence. Those girls had never met Shanda. They probably didn't even know who she was, and only Lori out of those three had met Melinda. Neither Hope or Toni had met her before, but Lori was the person to introduce them all to each other. And when Melinda told them that she wanted to go and scare a girl who had been a copycat and had stolen her girlfriend, they got in the car and very quickly became willing participants. On the night of January 10th, 1992, Shanda was staying at her father Stephen's home in Jeffersonville, Indiana. She usually spent the weekends there. At approximately 10 p.m., Toni Lawrence and Hope Rippey knocked on the front door. They told Shanda that they were friends with Amanda and said that Amanda wanted to see her. Shanda believed them, but she was hesitant to go. She was hesitant to see Amanda in the first place, so she told them that she had plans for the night, but if they came back later, she would potentially sneak out with them. So they left, and Shanda's dad kind of overheard the conversation and asked who they were and what that was about, but Shanda just brushed it off. Eventually, her dad and his wife went to bed. When the girls came back, Shanda decided to go with them. She walked out and she got in the car. Lori was the only one out of the group that had a car, so she was driving, but Shanda could have never expected that Melinda Loveless was hiding in the back seat. As soon as Shanda was inside the car, Melinda lunged forward. She grabbed her by her hair, she pulled her head back, and she pressed a to her throat. She demanded to know about Shanda's relationship with Amanda. Lori started driving and they headed toward a location they called the Witch's Castle. It's an abandoned ruined stone structure in Indiana, about 10-15 minutes away from Shanda's dad's house, known locally for ghost, scary, spooky stories. At the Witch's Castle, Shanda was dragged out of the car and taken inside of the abandoned building. She was bound with rope. Melinda taunted her, taking the rings off of her fingers. Hope tore off her Mickey Mouse watch that she had on and she played with it. Lori started making claims about the site being linked to witches and death. I guess she was very into witchcraft and the occult, but she was very clearly saying things in an attempt to terrify Shanda. At one point, she lit a shirt on fire and told Shanda that that's what she would look like at the end of the night. They continued taunting Shanda, but they got worried, they got nervous that passing cars would possibly be able to see them inside. The group eventually then forced Shanda into the trunk of the car and they drove to Lori's house in Madison, Indiana, which was around an hour away. At Lori's house, while her family was asleep, the violence escalated significantly. Melinda and Lori beat Shanda repeatedly. They used a rope to her. They stabbed her with an Later on in the night, they also S8'd her with a foreign object. At some point during this, still at Lori's house, the group became convinced that Shanda was gone. They dragged her out and put her back into the trunk of the car. Then they went inside, cleaned up, and played some games. Toni was the one person who wasn't actively participating in what was happening, but she was also not stopping it. She wasn't intervening in the slightest. She would later say that she was frozen in terror. Shanda, who was still alive, barely, but she was, started making sounds, attempting to yell from the trunk of the car outside. The girls heard her from inside, so Melinda and Lori then decided they needed to take Shanda elsewhere. Those two got in the car and they started to drive, but they could still hear Shanda trying to scream from the trunk of the car. So they pulled over and Lori used a tire iron until she, quote, heard her head cave in. I know I don't even have to explain to you guys how awful and horrible and terrible this is. That is obvious, but it's heartbreaking to imagine Shanda, 12 years old, trying her absolute best to try and hold on to any hope, any last bit of energy that she had left, but without a doubt, the last hours of her life were filled with nothing but terror. Eventually, Melinda and Lori returned back home. They went to go pick up the other girls, and in the early hours of January 11th, 1992, the four girls drove to a remote cornfield off of Lemon Road in rural Jefferson County in Indiana. They pulled Shanda out of the trunk, and she was still clinging to life. Melinda Loveless poured lighter fluid from a squeezy bottle over Shanda's body. Hope then struck a match and threw it over the top of her, causing a fire. Shanda Sharp Shar was 12 years old. She burned in that cornfield in southern Indiana while 4 teenage girls just stared down at her. Mommy was the only word that she could say in the end. The girls got back in the car and they drove away. And what did they do? You may be wondering, oh, well, they stopped at McDonald's for breakfast. They laughed about what they had done. Melinda was proud that she finally had been able to do what she had been thinking about doing for a very long time. She was so proud, in fact, that she headed over to Amanda's house and told her what they did to Shanda. Amanda didn't believe her. That was until Melinda reportedly showed her evidence. Later that morning, 2 men driving on Lemon Road in Jefferson County noticed the fire in that field. They stopped and they called the authorities. Jefferson County Police and Emergency Services responded to that scene, and what they found confirmed their worst fears: the badly burned body of a child. Shanda Shar was pronounced deceased at the hospital. She would forever remain only 12 years old. It did not take long for authorities to figure out who was responsible for this. Toni began talking almost immediately. On that same night, January 11th, she told her parents what had happened. Her parents called the police, and within hours of Shanda's body being discovered, law enforcement had the names. Police arrested all 4 girls within days of the murder. Each gave statements and each implicated the other, but the details that emerged from those interviews, from the physical evidence collected at the witch's castle, from the evidence collected at Lori's house and at the crime scene, painted a picture of 8 hours of sustained cruelty that Shanda Shar was subjected to. Melinda Loveless, aged 16 at the time of the crime, pleaded guilty to 3 charges. She was sentenced to 60 years in prison. She was released in 2018 after serving 26 years. Lori, age 17 at the time of the crime, pleaded guilty to 3 charges. She was sentenced to 60 years as well. She was released in 2007 after serving approximately 25 years. Hope, 15 years old at the time of the crime, also pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to 35 years. She was released in 2006 after serving 14 years. Toni, aged 15 at the time of the crime, pleaded guilty to criminal confinement only, stating that she did not participate directly in the violence but failed to intervene or seek help. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison and was released in 2001 after serving only 9 years. She was the first one of the 4 to be free, but all 4 currently free. Shanda's family has never fully recovered. How do you? Grief is already such a difficult thing, let alone when it's unexpected and when the person is so incredibly young. Her mom has spoken publicly over the years about the ongoing pain of losing a child, losing her daughter in such a violent, senseless way. Quote, she was just a little girl. She was just 12 years old. I'm like in shock, not only at how I'm in shock about everything in this case, about the fact that they did so many things at Lori's house, about the fact that nobody got help, about how young Shanda was, about the reason why, because she stole her girlfriend, and shocked about the fact that these girls, 15, 16, 17 years old, how do you even think of such violence at any age, but especially as a high schooler? It's beyond me. That's all for me today. Thank you for spending time with me and for listening to Shanda's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.